Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Jaco Hofman is a socio-gerontologist. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And leader of the Optentia Research Focus subprogram, which is Aging and Generational Dynamics in Africa. The acronym for that is AGENDA. I thought that's excellent. He's at the Northwest University at the Vaal Triangle campus, as well as James Martin. He's also a James Martin Senior Research Fellow at the Oxford Institute of Population Aging at the University of Oxford. He's also an Honorary Research Fellow of the Institute of Aging in Africa at the University of Cape Town. He furthermore coordinates the UN-endorsed African Research on Aging Network and is a board member of the South African Care Forum, as well as a past president of the South African Gerontological Association. Jaco co-directs with Professor Sebastiana Kalula of UCT, the International Longevity Center in South Africa. I met Professor Hofman when he accompanied another specialist in the area from, I don't know exactly what your relationship is, you must forgive me, but he was a professor from the Netherlands, and he presented an excellent guest lecture at Da Vinci. And Jaco knows him, they know each other, and I think you've worked together in certain areas as well. And he's the one who introduced us, Professor, what was it, Bart, no? Professor Bart, real Dutchman. He introduced him to Da Vinci, so that was also an excellent presentation. So with those few words, thank you very much for coming and welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rinal, for your kind and even generous introduction. And congratulations, Anthony. Anthony is also a Northwest University alumnus.
So that's right.
Yeah. Thank you very much for being here. You know, aging is not a very sexy topic, I have to say. So I'm always surprised when even one person pitch up. But I want to share with you a bit about the broad trends of population aging, and maybe in future you will be kind of stimulated to look into it with different eyes. So first, a disclaimer right at the start. No, I haven't got the recipe for eternal youth. The plain and simple departure point is, if you do not die young, you're going to age. So that's the simple departure point. As a matter of fact, one even starts with the aging process as a fetus. So our departure point is the life course. It's a natural process, and it's part of the journey, and it goes on right across the lifespan, and it is not a disease. So, you know, that point where you can say, I've earned my wrinkles fair and square, so what? So, and you know, the wonderful thing with regard to aging is that aging populations across the world. So I'm not that much interested in individual aging at this stage. Of course, that is fascinating, but that's not my focus. My focus is trends in population aging. So, and the fact that we live longer lives is one of the great achievements of humankind. So, you know, we can list so many wonderful things: technology, this, that, the moon, space, the internet, and so forth. But one of the major achievements of humankind is the whole longevity revolution. especially in the last bit of the 20th century and now in the 21st century. So, but this will affect the world in a most profound sense, this achievement. And I don't think we have even contemplated the start of it. So how can we prepare and adapt our living environment for the impacts of this changing demographic and turn these challenges into opportunities? You know, there's kind of this alarmist kind of headings in Europe. You know, the grey tsunami, and so forth, and so forth. So what are we going to do with that? I want to share maybe a few stats with you. You don't have to remember it, just let it flow over you. And it's truly amazing. So the number of people today aged 60 plus, 60 and over, has, listen to this, doubled since 1980.
Really?
So, and within the next year or two, we will have more older people on the face of the earth than young people, than children specifically. Let me clarify this. So within the next 5 years, towards 2025 and so forth. So for the first time in human history, the number of adults aged 65 and over will outnumber children under the age of 5.
Okay.
So, and this is only the start of the process. And by 2050, these older adults aged 65 and above will outnumber children under the age of 14. So 5 years and then another 25 years, and 65 ages and above will outnumber 14 and below. So what about the fourth age, the 80-year-olds? So when let me just clarify, so third age is around 60 to 75, roughly. It's all relative. So, and then fourth age from 75 to 100 plus. What about the 80s? So the world will have more people who live to see their 80s and 90s than ever before. In the middle of the 20th century, that's 1950, we had 14 million people aged 80 and above. 14, 1-4. On the whole planet, 14 million 80 pluses. By 2050, that's not that far off. So there will be 100 million 80 pluses living in China alone.
Good God. Yes.
Goodness, people. So many grannies on the stoop.
Yes.
Across the world, we will have 400 million 80 pluses. 400 million 80 pluses.
How many
That's
are there
huge.
at the moment?
So I
Average.
don't exactly know, but I think it's about 100 million kind of across the globe.
Sure.
But that's the fastest growing age group, the 80 pluses. So, so I want to ask a few questions. What is behind this? What is causing this? So,
Could I try and answer?
yeah.
Well, you know, I've got a thing in my mind that's telling me with what's going on, this you know, the big companies that are sort of trying to manipulate us with the medications, the stress levels and all of that, because that's affecting reproduction. So, and also the economies, because I mean, you need a lot of money to put a kid through school, because a kid through school, it's a lot more difficult than when we were children. Our parents, one parent worked, the other one looked after the children. Nowadays, both husband and wife work, and the kids, they've got an au pair, etc. But they don't go for 2 or 3 children. I mean, look at the number of kids that some families have.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom's family, there were 8. My dad's family, there were 6. Okay, they didn't have TV, so they had other sports. But, you know, what I'm saying
That
is
was going to come
nowadays,
up.
It makes them 2 or 3 children.
Yeah.
It depends on the culture as well.
Yeah.
Where you're coming from.
Absolutely, you hit the
So
nail
you've got-
on the head.
You've got cultures that are sort of more advanced, less children. Cultures that are sort of coming up are still producing 4 or 5 kids, but can they maintain those kids?
Yeah.
The level of diseases for the lower age kids is much higher. So I think that's where your
Yeah, indeed.
mortality rate-
Absolutely. So there are 3 drivers, and one of them, lower fertility rates across the world. Even, hesitantly I say, Africa. I'll come back to that. So across the world, the trend is lower fertility. Across the world, another driver, a second one. So lower mortality. So people just live longer. Technology, better nutrition, and so forth. And the third driver, and that's the tricky one, because the other we can, with quite certainty, we can predict fertility rates, mortality rates, and so forth. The other tricky one, because that depends on politics and environmental issues and so forth, that's migration.
Okay.
So, for example, Syria, they now experience huge out-migration of skilled people because of a war. So, Zimbabwe and so forth, you can imagine. Okay, so it's the combination of all 3 these things, but particularly the first 2. The combination of longevity, lower mortality, and lower fertility. That makes for aging populations. Usually people only think about the longevity part.
Yes.
So, but it's this combination, lower fertility, lower mortality. So, this to the extent that to a great measure of certainty, I can say that the 21st century will be the last century of youth. So what do we experience? We take it for granted that this is happening in the developed world. Huh? So,
So can I stop
yeah.
there for a minute? I'm not a statistician, but
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense. Because the lower fertility eventually will end up in having very few old people.
Yeah, eventually.
Once the old one.
Yeah.
What is that gap? By when will the trend be
Reverse.
Yeah. So what we will.
in terms of projections?
Yeah, so we've got good projections up till 2050. We can now predict, again, with fair certainty.
The 25th century.
No,
No,
2050.
2050.
25th
Yeah.
century.
Okay.
So that the population size will be between 9 billion and 10 billion. Initially, the predictions were 25 billion.
Oh, really?
So, but the lowering of fertility impacted, and people were just kind of surprised by the rate of the lowering of fertility. So I hear what you say. The point is, in the 21st century, I don't know beyond that, we will experience old populations. Less kids, more older people. That's all I can say.
That's very interesting.
So the developed world, so is this old population at the moment, And but that happened against a certain background. You know, they acquired wealth, they put systems in place. You all know that if you go to Europe, you know, all the amazing systems in place for older people, the welfare state and so forth. So rising standards, overall expansion of state resources, and now I have to add up till now. So because they're running into problems, it's too expensive. Even the Netherlands can't afford all of this. Developing countries, however, and I want to come closer to home, so will experience the steepest increase in the older population segment. As we sit here, already more than 60% of the aged population live in developing countries. So, relatively spoken, the percentage is high in the developed world, still lower percentages in the developing world, but the absolute numbers are staggering. So, at the moment, 60% of older people in the developing world, increasing to about 75% in 2025 and 85% in 2050. 85%.
In Africa?
No, the developing world.
Okay.
China, India, Africa,
yes,
and
yes,
so forth. So 85% of the aged population will live in the developing world. So, and the interesting thing here is the pace and the sheer absolute numbers. So while it took Europe, France specifically as an example, 120 years to move from a young to a mature population, it takes countries in Asia 25 years. Why? The momentum, the youth bulge moving upwards. That momentum is huge. So what about sub-Saharan Africa? We will remain the youngest region on the face of the earth. Within the next 30 years, we will contribute, if not 2 billion, at least 1 billion people to the population of the earth. So if we end up at 10 billion in 2050, 10 billion people, we are currently around 7 billion.
Yeah.
So Africa will contribute 2 billion and the rest of the world 1 billion.
But that's total population.
Total.
Yes.
So at least we will contribute, if it's 9 billion, 1 billion.
Yeah.
So we're a young population. Our face, the image of Africa is young. So, and the interesting thing is that at the very same time, we add 2 billion, if not 2 billion, 1 billion people to the earth, to the population. We will experience this amazing growth in older people. So currently, we have around 48 million 60-plussers in sub-Saharan Africa. And this will quadruple in the next 30 years to 163 million. So this means, don't try to remember, just get the feel. So from around 48 million to 163, 65 million. So this means we will have 70 million more older people than Northern and Western Europe combined. We will have 40 million more people than in North America.
Older people.
Older people. So And what's our background? So we will grow old, all these numbers, but we'll still be poor.
Yeah.
So the difference between the developed world and the developing world. So longevity, this is the point I want to make, and then we can discuss a bit. So longevity, even if achieved in Africa, so often then entails a life of compromised health because of systems not in place, scant access to general, let alone specialized resources of care, and similarly constrained financial resources. So it's one thing to be able to live for a long time, longevity. It's a whole different issue to speak about healthy longevity, because that's what we are actually looking for.
Right.
So, and that is what we will be confronted with, and I want to challenge you as business leaders and so forth with regard to this specific topic, and we will explore that a bit more in a moment.
So
Yeah.
there's just two things, okay? One is sustainability, that's going to create a big issue.
Yeah.
But because of the older generation, and when I say old, right, I always got to say, I might be older than yesterday, I'm still younger than tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the thing is that what I'm saying is that the older generation come from a background where they've lived off the land. They know how to live off simple things, not the stuff that's being produced now, because that is what's killing us off. Okay. Because then you've got another factor coming in, that if these governments decide, let's kill off part of the population, we'll get the producers to start adding different ingredients into our food, and that's how we become ill with the cancers and all of that stuff. That is that is a factor that one.
Kind of the lifestyle stuff.
Yeah,
huh?
but you have to look at that, because a lot of processed stuff. What do they put in that? We don't know. So that can kill us off. But then the older generation will say, no, you keep your stuff. I'll eat what I want to eat. I'm not interested in it. You know, you're going back to the grassroots. You're going back to maybe even eating the hemp plant, because I mean, they used to eat that as a salad many moons ago. Not smoking it, but eating it as a salad. You know, cut off the leaf and put it in, like your coca leaf, the coca, the cocaine leaf. They chew that, they get their energy from that, and they don't need anything else, and it's healthy stuff. So, you know, that's
That's relative.
So,
No.
yeah, so interesting. Yeah.
Is this all science or?
There's conspiracy theories.
So, yeah. So I want to focus in on just kind of very briefly on specifically Africa. You know, with this background I just gave you, at Oxford, at our business school, the Said Business School, and our director is Peter Tefano. He introduced, and we were part of that development. So he introduced a whole module that's compulsory for all MBAs on aging. Because, you know, if you want to think business opportunities, if you want to think within the next 25, 30 years, so you have to consider this dynamics all across the world.
Sure.
So,
No,
yeah.
but I'm very interested. I'm waiting for you to get to the point where we talk about our current youth bulge.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Because, okay. Shall I? Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
So now I want to share with you just for a moment, I won't go into detail, the current status of research on aging in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa specifically. And the focus at the moment, up till now, for the past 2 decades, was on downward support. Let me explain that. So, specifically in South Africa, but also in the rest of Africa, in the context of unemployment, poverty, and the HIV/AIDS pandemic. So we got to a situation, and especially in southern Africa, where there are small, means-tested and universal grants, very small. South Africa has a fairly generous one, but Lesotho, Swaziland, and so forth. We've got around 6, 7 countries, especially focused in southern Africa, based in southern Africa, with a grant of some kind. But given that, older people took the responsibility to support younger generations, not only through care activities, but also through financial means and so forth. So that is the focus of the research on aging for the past 20 years. Of course, there were small projects on old age homes and institutions, but that was focused on the white population, and that really is such a small percentage within the bigger story.
Can I just ask you, so do you mean that when you talk about the older people taking care of the younger generation, that's the grandparents and the grandparents who look after the babies?
And teenagers and so forth.
Yeah, but I mean that's the grandparents, not the mothers and the fathers.
G3, generation 3 looking after, or generation 4 looking after the younger generation.
Okay.
That was the focus of research, and you can understand why.
Why, yeah.
So the pension system in South Africa, the grant system, HIV/AIDS, poverty, because we've got a grant allocation up to the age of 18, and then nothing, mind the gap, and then from 60 plus. So you get 30-year-old unemployed men having to look their grandmothers in the eye to buy deodorant and so forth.
Right.
That put older people in South Africa in quite an interesting position of power, of a pensioner identity and so forth, but also made them very vulnerable, especially the women. So anyhow, that's the kind of research we focus. So point is, the overall evidence available shows that the net wealth flow is for the expense of older generations towards younger generations in contemporary sub-Saharan Africa, and specifically South Africa. It's only now that we start with a growing debate on this question: who will care for the carers? And that's where I want to challenge you business guys with regard to the whole care economy. It is a field we haven't even touched, the care economy. And I just want to kind of summarize, and I'm not going through all my points, and say, maybe this is the interesting challenge, because we will deal with this huge absolute number of older people on the youngest continent, the youth bulge. So see it in your mind, the youth bulge on the one hand. On the other hand, these older people with their health needs as a result of the rise in non-communicable diseases. So these lifestyle diseases. We've got a huge problem in South Africa specifically with regard to hypertension, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and so forth. So, and in Africa, we are dealing with a quadruple burden of disease. Not only these non-communicable diseases, lifestyle diseases, but at the very same time, infectious diseases, HIV/AIDS and so forth, and then diseases related to poverty, TB and so forth. So, and then the very high incidence of injuries due to violence of some kind and traffic accidents in Africa. So a quadruple burden of disease. Given this all, on the other hand, the question is, how do we harness in Africa the youth bulge towards a demographic dividend? So we need to skill, and we're almost halfway through our window of opportunity in South Africa. We need to skill this youth bulge. And the question we as gerontologists are raising, given these masses of older people and the fact that we haven't got systems in place. Even South Africa hasn't got a long-term care policy. We've got a policy on older people, but not a long-term care policy. Now the question is, what can we do? And one suggestion is, can't we harness the care economy or use the care economy to harness the youth bulge towards a demographic dividend, so that young people could be skilled and trained as caregivers, because we need community caregivers. So don't think institutions like old age homes and so forth. No. So we need Africa appropriate programs and initiatives and so forth to address the needs of this huge absolute number of older people in need of care. So, and I want to conclude. So, point is, besides meeting an apparently growing demand, even India is now capitalizing on this gap in South Africa with a program called MedWell. You can Google it. So, where they provide home-based care to, communities. On a personal note, my father had a fall 2 months ago, and suddenly we as a family, we were confronted with, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? How are we going to deal with his care situation? How are we going to manage it? And that's how I ended up with Medwell, the Indian company. So, and we called, how many people, and we just couldn't find a trained caregiver, a trained carer. In the meantime, I pass around the corner of that little dorp, people sitting, not knowing, what to do, unemployed, and so forth. So, anyhow, the Indian industry capitalizing on this. So, on the one hand, there's need, but maybe we can also contribute to the widening of employment opportunities for African youth through accredited training courses, because that's our big crisis. Our Department of Health and Social Development hasn't got the ability to put this in place, to accredit courses and to maintain a register of qualified carers and caregivers. So, and with that, I want to end. So, a challenge, but also an amazing opportunity. And that's only one sector. I haven't even touched on what's going on, opportunities in China, opportunities in the rest of Europe, because the aging of industry, we know how the oil industry, the median age of people working in the oil industry is 45. We know that the median age of nurses in Europe is deep in their 40s. So, and the challenges that will open for skilled, appropriately skilled African young people. So, and with that I end. The challenge, the opportunity.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah.
All right.
Okay. There is one could look at, because something that is actually up and coming at the moment. And people say co-ops, but if you structure a co-op properly, you create it as a non-profit. Because if you look at some of these old age homes, they charge you the earth. I think you won't get out of them paying not less than 20,000 rand a month, which is a lot of money. And if you haven't got that kind of money put away, or something that can generate...
Now that's only an option for a very small...
Okay, so the
group.
co-op would be the best way to do it, because you become community-based. Community-based means that within that community, your trained will be growing your own food. So you become self-sustainable in that environment. Also, at the same time, you can also produce for outside for further development down the line. But then it's all sort of you've got to handle it very specifically and very carefully. You have to put up a whole charter, a whole way of actually running this in that manner. I heard at one stage that the pensioners from the Netherlands, what they were doing, because there's no work in Europe, the pensioners were going out to countries and living there for 6-12 months with the pension money that they got, because your exchange rate, and they were training people. They trained people in that country without getting a salary, because their income that they're getting from their pension can sustain them while training other people. You know, so
Okay.
to look at, you know, how do we? It's a risk, but it's an opportunity, because all risk is an opportunity.
Yeah, what I hear from you is a bit of cross-subsidization and so forth, or cross-fertilization. So, and some of the retirement or the industry institutions within the retirement industry work in this way. You know, they will sell life rights, for example, to the wealthy, and use a percentage of that to subsidize people from lower socioeconomic groupings and so forth. Now, these are all models that we need to look into and to see what can be replicated, what can be upscaled, but appropriately African. We don't want to impose Western models because it's not sustainable, it's too expensive.
Waterfall Estate is a very good example.
Yeah.
Okay, there was
So-
a hand there, and then Ross, and then T'Challa.
I want to come back to health and longevity.
Yeah.
As the only one over the age of 70 in the room, I've got a very clear idea of personally how I want to actually handle it. And I cannot for the life of me understand anybody that actually wants to continue living, wants the quality of life in their terms. I mean, everybody's got different levels of quality of life. I've got mine. Once that time comes, never mind terminal illness or long before that. Once Alzheimer's is kind of starting to come to the horizon, I'm checking out. And the only problem is that I can't do it in South Africa.
And that's the ethical, moral
It's the big
issue. Yeah.
It must be factored in all of these projects.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that
No, indeed.
the new generations
Yeah.
will have some more sense.
Choice.
Fair enough, yes.
So we know as gerontologists, we absolutely rejoice in this. We
Fantastic.
were really successful with the third age as a humankind. From 60 to around 75. People have high quality lives. You know, 60 is the new 40, you know, all that stories. You can get really excited about it all. So, but from around the fourth age, 75 upwards, we are really not that successful with regard to quality of life. And there's no way, you know, there's no sense in adding years to life without life to years. So that's the point.
Lovely.
It's going to be the
Yeah.
pharmaceutical industry,
Terrible.
the hospitals,
Yeah.
the medical aid.
Yeah.
I've spoken to it and go.
Yeah.
He agrees in principle, but they're all colluding to make as much money We spend 60%
Absolutely,
of-
these private hospitals
60%
and so forth.
of
Yeah.
medical expenses
Yeah.
in the last 6 months.
Yeah,
Good.
So why on earth finish 6 months earlier?
yeah.
Medical aids rates have come down from 5,000 a month to 50 rand a month.
Absolutely. You know, the ideal is to compress morbidity.
So you need
You know,
to start robbing
yeah.
those
Yeah.
big, greedy...
It's the big money. It's the big money.
A lot of conspiracy theorists. Ross?
I think tying into what you said now, if you've got the 4 ages, is that those scales going to start extending? You know, so age 3 could be
Yeah,
70 through to 90.
Yeah. yeah.
And then also I'm interested in what happens to retirement.
That is a very good
There's an
question.
assumption of retirement at
Yeah.
65,
Yes,
but with life expectancy increasing,
yes,
what are the chances of
You've seen the
me
trend.
retiring at 65?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I personally don't think.
Yeah, you've seen the trend in Europe. They are raising the retirement age.
Age.
It's now 67 and so forth.
And the state doesn't have one.
Yeah, so
You just got to guarantee. If you want to retire, you retire, but they can't force you to retire.
yeah, but in theory, yeah. So, but
We've got a case.
yeah.
A case in particular.
yeah. The other day we had a session with Judge Cameron, Edwin Cameron, and he looked into the whole issue of ageism, and of course that's enshrined into our constitution.
that's it.
You should not discriminate on the basis of race, you know,
Age,
we know
yeah,
it, and then also age. So, but that's the one discrimination that hasn't been tested in the Constitutional Court.
That's interesting.
So I challenge you guys, so go for it. So, yeah, but the trend is that retirement age
Will increase.
Increase. South Africa is one of the only countries that kind of lowered their retirement age. And that's an interesting story, or the age of receiving a pension, that's the point. So from 65 years for men to 60. And
For those on grants.
yeah.
Okay.
So they challenged that in the Constitutional Court, and it was kind of a gender discrimination. So, and they won. So, so grants are for both males and females 60. 65 years, of course. So, but it should be challenged. I think that's one of the
Yeah.
issues. Yeah.
So, Java?
My question was covered to talk about the right to death versus the right to life.
Okay.
Because there is a point in time where both need to coexist as far as
Yeah,
I'm concerned.
you're
Humans
right.
can have
Correct.
the option to make the choice.
That's-
Archbishop Tutu is an ambassador for the right to choose and so forth. But, you know, we still have a way to go. You know, it's a culturally sensitive and a morally a very sensitive
What are they going to
issue.
charge you?
Yeah.
Euthanasia. I mean, my wife has got a couple of clients who go to the pharmacy, and they've actually got, they go to Switzerland every 3 years
Mm.
to renew their contract. But if they do become terminally ill or critically ill, they fly them out and
Goodness.
It's not a nice thing to say.
But you know, that's for the absolutely
Well,
wealthy people and so forth.
No,
So,
no, no. I
yeah.
want my body
Yeah.
to be shot into space.
Yeah. Okay, my goodness. So on that note, maybe I can conclude. On that note, so there's this philosopher, and you know he's really pushing the boundaries. At you know, at Oxford we don't say the word, the C word. The other place, Cambridge.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, but he is into he theorizes and has a philosophy around extreme longevity. Because theoretically, you know, if you can through technology enhance life. You know, there's my mother, 82. You will think she's 60. So 2 knee replacements, 2 hip replacements, a shoulder replacement, and so forth and so forth. If you can do it, you know, now in our year and age, what are the possibilities, you know, within the next 20 or 50 years?
Well, there's the 3D print.
And yeah, the 3D printer. And Aubrey de Grey, you can Google him, Aubrey de Grey. So he plays around with extreme longevity. You know, that you principally can actually live almost forever.
Forever.
So, you know, parts are replaced, of course.
Yes.
And so forth. Yeah. So you ask about retirement. The other issue is about inheritance.
That's
So
true.
that, you know, care will eat up your inheritance or the inheritance, and next generations will be poorer. So and so forth. So all kinds of interesting issues. I haven't mentioned housing. I haven't mentioned pensions. I haven't mentioned technology. The role
Well, the
of
economy. I mean, I think for
economy,
me, yeah. How do
Yeah.
older people still contribute to the economy, or are they just users?
No,
Users now.
no. So the focus in African gerontology was up
On
till
a
now
contribution.
on older people as contributors.
There you are.
And in that sense, we started off with a aging research agenda on a very positive note, different from Europe.
Right.
So where people were kind of marginalized and
Yes.
retired
Yes.
and so forth.
Yeah.
So we've got a different
That's interesting.
approach to aging. But that approach crowded out the actual needs of older people.
Right.
So we haven't attended to how do we care for older people, not only how are younger generations cared by older people,
Right.
but
Yes.
so forth. Yeah.
So can I just say something?
Okay.
Just a quick one. You find the younger generation, okay, they get a monthly allowance. And some of them get quite a healthy allowance.
What do you mean by allowance? The grant?
No, from their parents.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, from
Pocket
the
money.
parents.
Pocket,
Yeah.
pocket
Yeah.
money.
Okay?
Yeah.
Some of them have gone to a point where they've actually gone to get work. And when they get there, they say, well, what's the salary? I look at this and they say, sorry, that's not enough. I get more in pocket money. So why should I work? Okay, so that is also contributing now because us as parents have actually allowed them to become that.
Yeah,
And
you
that's why
created it.
I look at something and I say, oh, I'm the sandwich generation. I'm the stuff in between because, you know, my parents come from, immigrated. So you're looking after them. They didn't look after their parents because they're away. Then you got your youngsters on this side. So you're sitting as a condiment in the middle, supporting the 2 slices of bread. Now we're becoming dagwood because we now sort of
The whole sandwich thing is very interesting. So yeah, because we are thinking about 5 generations now in households,
Yes.
especially multi-generational households, and that's quite a challenge. And what we see with population aging is the verticalization of families. You know, so not that many siblings anymore. So, but more generations living longer together.
Okay.
So the verticalization, and that's the crisis in China with a one-child policy. So they verticalized families. So a couple, theoretically, will need to care for 4
Older people.
parents, and then 8 it's the 2-4-8 principle.
Good Lord.
So, but there are no siblings. So, there's verticalization of family.
And the burden really is
The
becoming
burden is
bigger.
immense.
Yeah.
So one of the big challenges we have in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and in Asia is the relative role of families to the state, to
Right.
government.
Yes.
You know, who does what, who contributes what, and so forth. So,
Wow. Wow, fascinating stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, I think on that very, very interesting note, let's conclude and say thank you very much. We have a tradition.
Oh, lovely.
Yes,
Yeah.
who did you think this was for? Okay. So we have a tradition. No, he must earn his stripes. to give you a gift.
So thank you so much.
And this
Linda.
gift is a puzzle. Now, on your way to Oxford, okay, try
will keep me busy.
and do the puzzle and let us know how long it took.
It's not a research puzzle.
No. It's a play puzzle. We're allowed
Wonderful.
to play.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.